Good afternoon. My name is Tom Suter. I'm the CEO and founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel. And this is a really interesting topic that I'm going to try to learn a lot about, but we're really looking at managing millions of machine identities across hybrid cloud environments. And I just had this conversation with one of my folks that they're the manager, but it's going to be the manager of bots and et cetera, et cetera. So it's happy to get this going this afternoon and taking time out of your busy day. So I'd like to welcome all the attendees. Special thanks to Lindsay Drake, Aaron Albrecht, and the rest of the Venafi team. They've been a great partner of ATARC's, and I love how they try to get us into some new areas that we might not have delved very deeply. So this afternoon, we're going to have hear from our panelists. We're going to follow that with some Q&A and pop in a poll question or two and then answer your questions. So if all my panelists could come on live, that would be fantastic. Great. Alicia, Emily, we're going to get everybody on here. There we go. Fantastic. A lot of smiling faces. Jordan, I think we're still waiting for you. Okay. So what we'll do is I'm going to do some quick introductions, and we'll start off with you, Jordan. How are you doing today?
All right. Can you see me okay?
I can see you terrific. Are you working out of your home office, or are you at your regular office?
This is our regular office. We decided to do it off-site today to avoid any of the chaos at home. So
I can only
I have two young boys. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a little bit about myself.
Right?
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep. Absolutely.
Great. And we also got Alicia. Alicia, if you can get off mute. You got your company woman seal behind you, but I can't tell where you're working out of today.
I am working out of a mall parking lot.
That is 2020 to 2021.
Things have changed, yes.
Great stuff. And we also have with us Emily Barbaro. How are you doing today, Emily?
Good. How are you?
Great. And you look like you're out of your home office today?
Yes, I am. I made a dash from the office here just to make sure I wouldn't have any issues. So glad to be here.
Okay. And we also have Sanjay. That looks like an office to me.
That's my home office, Tom.
Home office. What are all those manuals behind you? It's like some technical stuff?
All kinds of things, but yeah.
Great. And we also have Aaron Albrecht with Venafi. How are you doing there, Aaron?
I'm great, Tom. Always a pleasure.
And what is that? Lake Tahoe? What is that behind you?
Desolation Wilderness. For those of you that know Northern California, it's a secluded place that you can only hike into. My son and I went there for a Boy Scout trip a year or two ago. Beautiful place.
Fantastic. Well, anyway, let's kick off the discussion. I'm going to start off with Emily Barbaro, and I didn't get the titles in there, so I'll do that now. She's Deputy Chief Data Officer, Branch Chief, Office of Intelligence and Analysis at the United States Department of Homeland Security. And good to have you here today. You moved on my screen. I was like, I saw you in the lower left, and then you moved over to the upper right. But glad I'm here today, Emily. Looking forward to what's the latest and greatest with you.
So staying busy with even during the pandemic, I think we finally kind of found our battle rhythm. We work primarily on the high side, so the TSSCI environment. So with the pandemic, we had to figure out how to shift our operations. But what that allowed us to do is really take a look at what we are doing on the unclassified fabric and building out our cloud presence there to really support some of our research and development efforts around some of machine learning and data science. And so now we're hoping to leverage what we're doing on the unclassified fabric and push that up to the high side for us to use there operationally. So we're making it work.
Fantastic, thank you. And we're going to stay in DHS and go to some undisclosed parking lot where Alicia is working from today. And Alicia, let me get your title here. Cloud Program Manager, United States Department of Homeland Security. And of course, you've got a lot of data center experience too at DHS, but thank you for coming today.
No, no worries. So today at DHS in the HQ Cloud, which is a part of the OCIO headquarters environment, we stood up 2 cloud platforms, Azure, we call it Cirrus, and we have AWS, which we call Cloud Factory 2. We are currently working with our customers across all of DHS, but specifically within the management directorate under the Secretary of DHS to help them exodus the DC2 data center, so the Prospecta data center, because our 2 data centers are being, I don't want to say decommissioned, the contract for those data centers expired last year, so we had a year extension. So we're scrambling to help customers find a new home in the cloud.
Fantastic. It just seems like yesterday when you stood those 2 data centers up, but the technology moves on, right?
Exactly.
Yes. And we also have today Sanjay Gupta, who's Chief Technology Officer of the United States Small Business Administration. And I think it's been a very interesting year, calendar year anyway, for you at the SBA. And I know you're in the middle of PPP round 2. Love to hear what the latest and greatest is going on over there, and how you're dealing with the last PPP round.
Certainly, glad to be here, Tom, and happy to join my esteemed colleagues on this panel this afternoon. So yes, Sanjay Gupta, I'm the Chief Technology Officer with the Small Business Administration. Just a very quick intro for me. Been here about 4 years. I came from the private sector, and so this is my first foray in the federal government. And prior to this, I've been a CIO CTO now for 14 years, and I led a consulting practice with Gartner before that. And I've also authored 20 plus research papers with IDC, informing my fellow CIO CTOs and board of directors. So that's me just in a quick nutshell. Obviously, the last 4 years and the last 12 months have been very exciting, as some of you probably already know. The SBA has been at the forefront of the nation's economic recovery initiatives, Tom, that you just talked about. The PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan Programs. And those things are continuing to run. The PPP program had a hiatus starting sort of summer, and then when it got reinitiated back earlier last month, the EIDL program has continued all throughout. Just the nature of those 2 programs is slightly different. I think the few things sort of highlights is that we've been obviously faced with a tremendous scaling challenge. We continue to do that in terms of the volume of transactions we are processing, but also more importantly, the velocity at which we have to process this higher volume. So anyway, our scaling of operations have gone up from 50x to 100x or even more than that. And part of it is also some of the new legislation is driven from addressing areas which have not traditionally been addressed. And so just through the December stimulus bill that was passed, there was part of that was addressing what's called as the shuttered venues in the entertainment industry, or the stage and the stage environment, or the performance industry, if you will. So we had to ramp up programs very quickly to address those kind of needs. And then more often than not on the PPP program, you probably catch up in the news, like very recently, just as of Wednesday, there was a directive that that program is now only focused for small businesses that have less than 20 employees. So for a 2-week period, the PPP program is only open for businesses that have less than 20 employees. So the part of the challenge is not just that the volume of the transactions and the velocity, but the bigger challenge that we face is some of this dynamic nature of these programs. They are evolving to address the needs of the marketplace, if you will, right? And then that evolution obviously requires a lot of, if you will, work to make sure that we are addressing that requirement, and we are also delivering to that requirement. And obviously, the time crunch always is a factor. So anyways, we'll talk more about it, but that's sort of what's high in priority for us as we continue to deliver on those two flagship programs.
Great, thank you for that. And next we'll go with Jordan Derby. And Jordan is IT specialist at an interesting agency these days, Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. And Jordan, welcome again. And I know in our prep call, I think you got to step back and talk about the kind of work you're doing in this unique circumstance of bringing a civilian agency into the Department of Defense. I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Derby. I'm an IT specialist, the Deputy Chief Cloud Division within PEO, which is a directorate inside of DCSA. I kind of have to say that DCSA is unique in the sense is it's a combination of a few different entities being kind of merged together. We're going on probably not even 2 years now, so relatively new agency. And there's components both from DCSA, DMDC, OPM, what was DSS, the original kind of major agency that DCSA was originally. And that includes transition of IT technology as well as personnel, as well as different kind of policies and procedures that and different mission areas, all being kind of rolled underneath the DoD umbrella. So as you guys probably imagine, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that have to be taken into account. And NBIS is kind of the most visible piece of DCSA's IT projects, kind of trying to make sure that we're able to kind of do some innovative things as well as meet the need of all the new functional areas that DCSA is now taking over, at the end of this merge.
Great. And last but certainly not least, we have Aaron Albrecht, who's the Chief Product Officer at Venafi. And Aaron, it'd be great to get some perspectives from you. I know you kind of you're building a product that's got to work in DoD, civilian agencies, and then also on the commercial side. So you see quite a bit. You see a lot from the customer. Love to get your perspectives.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. And again, thanks for having me. I am really excited to talk today. And to give you a little bit of color, just rewind the tape. And for those of you that may not be familiar with Venafi, give you the quick thumbnail sketch and then talk about how I think it's really relevant to some of the things we've already touched on today. Venafi has been in business now for 14 years. So we started with a premise that there was a need for specialized systems management for back then what was called SSL certificates. The web was exploding in growth, and it was clear that this critical piece of cryptography was key to making the web work. Back early mid 2000s. But as time has evolved and we worked both with our government customers and commercial, we've realized that while the industry is very aware of human identity and access management, and many people invest in really important technologies like multi-factor authentication and virtual directories and things like that, and human identities, there's absolutely an underserved space for the machine equivalent. Sanjay touched on the fact that the speed and scale of machines, the volume and velocity of machine-to-machine transactions expanding, exploding 50 to 100 times, and the realization that if you look at any organization, government or commercial, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of machines conducting, automated machine-to-machine interactions that need to be trusted. They need to be secure. They need to be encrypted. Just caught reading my news feed last night. Fedwire went down. They haven't really said why. I think everyone on this call is probably also, very familiar with what happened with SolarWinds, and so really excited to talk with the panel and work with the panel today to help raise the awareness to both the challenges of securing machine identities and therefore making sure those machine-to-machines interactions are secure and trusted to enable the warfighter, and also hopefully share some ideas of things that we've seen our customers and commercial struggle with, and hopefully avoid our government customers with those challenges as well.
Great, great. And so the first question I'm going to ask is, and maybe I can go with you, Emily, where is your agency on as far as, what's the right balance of hybrid cloud, native cloud, legacy data centers, and how is it affecting, the idea of, the non-person identities, right? How does that look in your organization? Emily, we don't have your sound.
Right. That was my bad. It was a mute issue. So what I failed to mention when I introduced myself is we're the IC element of the intelligence community element of DHS. Yep. So largely what we do is all on the high side. So, and we're a small player in the IC, but we're also have a very small budget, and so we're very big into the multi-cloud and what we can leverage from our partners and what we consider services of common concern. So the IC has a great platform called iSight, which is a bunch of different services, which also is different clouds. So we have our own cloud where a lot of our own internal data is, but we work across the different clouds and leverage data that's available in the different clouds as well as the different services. So our whole model is to leverage as much as we can, just so that we're able to kind of grow given our kind of resource constraints, but then also not reinvent the wheel. And we're also able to kind of piggyback on some of the security that iSight framework already provides. Sure. Now we are building out our unclassified environment, and that's where we're starting to have some of the challenges around the machine to machine, because there are challenges when we interact with our components, so a CBP or an ICE, but then maybe one of our IC partners on the unclassified fabric. So we're realizing there's an incongruency on the unclassified side, and so that's kind of where we're kind of looking to put some requirements in and grow and change.
Great. Alicia, I'll stay at DHS. What's the right balance for an agency, and and then we'll get into a little bit more about what the challenges are when you have lots of different environments and machine-to-machine communication.
I don't know if we figured out the right balance, but for us right now, with having just the 2 cloud service providers and the 1 full service data center, this has been an okay balance for us, because we do have customers who are a little bit resistant to change, and they don't fully understand how identities will work in the cloud, or how their service will work in the cloud, or if it's cloud ready. So allowing those customers who are so used to the brick and mortar data center environments to stay there until our new program that we're standing up, customer engagement, has a chance to educate them on the services that we're going to provide, that we do provide in the cloud environments, and how it'll benefit their programs. It's okay for them to be there. So having this still brick and mortar data center and our 2 data centers that we have, our cloud data centers, this has been an okay balance for us. Now, next year and the years out, we're going, I don't want to say we have to force those customers to kind of get on board and learn the value of leveraging identity management in the cloud environments, and capacity and scale and consumption. But that's what I'm working hard on doing for the rest of this year, to getting people up to speed and educated.
Great, because one day those data centers are going to close, so, right?
Yeah, probably, I don't want to say very soon, but yes, they will be closing.
Makes all the sense in the world. Jordan, I mean, you've got a mix of all these legacy organizations, and how do you bring this all together? And, so what existing things do you have to work with, environments?
As you guys know, a lot of this is on-prem hardware, legacy type equipment. Some of it's actually running on mainframe IT equipment, and some of it is kind of semi-virtualized VMware, which is kind of like the original kind of virtualization type platform. And so the idea is to try to create an environment to where you can either lift and shift some of this stuff into the different cloud platforms, or redesign it to utilize the cloud services that are available and get some of the efficiencies out of those cloud services. Each individual kind of IT component is kind of unique in itself. So the challenge is trying to figure out a repeatable model that could be used for all these kind of unique type of systems that are all operational, by the way. Unique type of systems that have these kind of unique functionals, unique interfaces, and trying to provide the capability to have standardization and kind of move this stuff to the cloud, and still make it operational feasible without affecting the business area or the mission partners. So a lot of what we're trying to do specifically in our group is learn from other folks within the DoD, use their services and not try to reinvent the wheel, right? So for example, we're working with NGA for using their single sign-on capability and their JWIX cloud infrastructure hosting capability instead of trying to pursue our own. We're working with DISA in using their secure file gateway capability instead of building our own, right? Where we're kind of working with these different partner agencies that have this capability that's already mature, integrated into our IT needs. So that way we kind of get the benefit of what the government has already invested as a whole into these capabilities, and then kind of use it for our specific mission areas. So one of the things that, like I said, specifically our group, what we're trying to do is, what tends to happen is IT becomes the product and not the customer becomes the product, right? So the focus is on IT, but in reality, it should be the operations is the focus, right? And so we're trying to do these things of utilizing these existing services. Another one is we're using a tool that was developed by DISA called the Big Data Platform, using it as basically our application framework tool. Using these kind of existing capabilities that are mature and have been tested and authorized and gone through kind of the RMF bureaucracy. And then that way the focus is more on the capability and serving the kind of functional partners or the mission areas within the agency, as opposed to IT being kind of the primary focus. And so a lot of that is education is probably the biggest thing, right? So a lot of the kind of the staff kind of being melded together. They're users in a sense of they know how to work their computer. And so trying to explain some of the theories of what is a cloud or how does Agile work and all these XYZ is kind of foreign to them. But you need their support in order for the capability that you're building to be successful. So one of the things that we started doing is we started this with our ServiceNow capability. So we're using the government software as a service instance of ServiceNow. And so what we would do is, as these kind of entities within DCSA would have their abilities built out into ServiceNow, we would put them through kind of an initial training cycle, right? Give them the process of what the tenets of what a product owner in Agile does, give them the process of how Agile works, help them to understand the difference between that and program management, help them to understand how Jira and Confluence works, right? And so these are general users, giving them basic knowledge to understand the tools and capabilities and the limitations and expectations that the IT folks have. So that way you're starting off in some sense kind of on a level playing field to where the expectation isn't IT is going to fix everything, but at the same time, you don't have to do things the way it was done before.
Yeah, I mean, you got your hands full there, especially with the civilian agency OPM coming in there. Great answer. And Sanjay, it wasn't exactly like your story when you were upgrading a lot of the SBA, cloud, but it sounded somewhat similar, just with the challenges that they have over there. But
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, that's quite accurate, Tom. I think you and I have talked about in the past about how we initiated a cloud journey back in 2017 and how that has helped us from a mission standpoint. So one of the things about the SBA mission is around disaster response, and certainly, if there's a natural disaster, then we basically surge up in terms of staff, in terms of capabilities to respond to the surge and the disaster. So back in 2017, the 3 hurricanes obviously allowed us to surge very quickly because of the cloud foundation. And even now, as we speak, even though COVID-19 is the biggest, if you will, natural disaster we are working with, but just in recent times, as like last week, in fact, the greater Texas area was declared as a natural disaster because of the snowstorm there. And so in addition to our natural workloads, we have all of these other disasters we're dealing with. And so part of that is, so let me kind of put this in context as well here, Tom. So when we started pre-pandemic last year, we've grown 4x in the staff size since, let's say, January of last year to now. And so while all of this was happening, we were also in a maximum telework status. So we certainly have a hybrid environment. Not everything is in the cloud for us. We still have some of our key applications and systems which run in the traditional environment. But for the most part, where we had an opportunity, we did move those workloads into the cloud. And I'll give you a case in point. For example, the portal to our world is sba.gov, our primary website. We migrated that to the cloud. And I'll give you a case in point where that becomes important. So last year in April, when the CARES Act was launched, the president at that time tweeted about that and added sba.gov in his tweet. And immediately, within 60 minutes, the traffic coming into sba.gov went up by about 900%. Now, I can't imagine if we were in a traditional environment, what might have happened in terms of scaling up to it in 60 minutes. I just cannot fathom that situation, quite frankly. Just even Wednesday morning, just 2 days ago, or 1 day ago, I'm thinking Wednesday was 2 days ago, we're only on Thursday today. The president tweeted about the PPP program and the focus that I mentioned about on the small business community. And again, we saw a huge spike in the traffic coming to our sba.gov website. So those are just examples of things which we were able to migrate into the cloud, and we have been able to use that successfully from a scalability standpoint, from a reliability standpoint, from a resilience standpoint. And these are all auto-scaled. We're not sitting there and adding new hardware, if you will. Certainly, we couldn't do anything in 60 minutes, leave alone order something and put it in place and make it run, right? But let me sort of also give a couple other examples of how we have been able to leverage the cloud to drive the mission. So back in March, as we were ramping up in staff and also the maximum telework status was in play, we accelerated the implementation of a cloud-based secure connectivity solution, and instead of the traditional VPN solution. And the VPN solution, we'd been using that as well, but we'd already started implementation of this solution. And we accelerated the use of that. So what it did was allowed us to quickly improve customer experience with this new solution, improved our connectivity from a security standpoint, and allowed us more visibility into the performance and the traffic characteristics here, right? We also, since, as I mentioned, we were staffing we were ramping up on our staff at the same time in a maximum telework status, we relied on the virtual desktop infrastructure to be able to provision as we brought on new staff. And those were things that we were able to rapidly scale up as the need occurred. So it was just not the volume, like I talked about, the velocity of the transactions as well. Let me kind of address the whole topic that this session is about, machine identities. That has been a challenge, quite frankly, and one which we actually have, or I've had the opportunity to work on that back in 2019 timeframe, because One of the things I led was a CDM, or the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program, by the DHS CDM program team. And I led the 90-day CDM modernization initiative, working with the DHS CDM team. So one of the key things was, how do you even uniquely identify these virtual machines? And there was not really a model in place. So working with that CDM team, we actually developed a model to identify the virtual machines. And the challenges are many, but I'll just give you a very simple example. Ideally, if you're using the cloud the way it is intended to be used, these virtual machines are ephemeral. Simply put, they get instantiated when a need arises, and then they go away when the need goes away. And sometimes it could be seconds, it could be microseconds, it could be maybe a minute, maybe. So you are creating and destroying or terminating those virtual machine instances sometimes at the level of microseconds. So working with the CDM team, we did actually come up with a mechanism to how do you uniquely identify and manage and track these virtual machines in the cloud environment. And I think that is one of the foundation stones working with them that we were able to, I guess, overcome, because the CDM program in of itself was sort of more focused on the on-premises environment. So they're not actually dealt with this situation. So there's a lot more I can talk about it, but that's sort of a few snapshots around it.
That's pretty good. So did they ever come out with any guidance on it? I don't know if I'd seen that. Did I overlook that?
I'm sure it's in the works, probably, but we had worked and demonstrated jointly. This is how to identify and track, if you will, the virtual machines. And in the traditional environment, you can physically go and touch that server or something of that kind. But in the cloud world, there's nothing to go and touch, so to speak, right? But you need that way to track and manage and monitor and secure those virtual systems. So I'm hoping to see that soon. But we had published a report as well, and that was circulated as well widely.
Wow, I think, one of the things that we've been trying to do here at ATARC is kind of set up a lab environment. And we actually are going to be partnering with the CDM program here. It's not public, so don't tell anybody. No, I'm just kidding. It's coming out pretty soon. But boy, what an interesting project this would be. I hadn't thought of it until this, but this would be a really interesting. We need some industry partners too, by the way. To kind of pull this in, because I honestly, before I came into this, I didn't understand it. I haven't understood it. So I'm learning like everybody else here. Okay. I'm going to go to Aaron. And what is the private sector? How do they deal with this? And how would you compare and contrast the private sector with government?
Sure. So a couple of things. And at the outset, I want to pick up with a couple of things I heard Alicia and Sanjay and Jordan speak to, which is, whether it's civilian, government, or commercial, there is an absolute need to innovate and modernize, and everyone universally is excited about the cloud for that. It gives you the infinite scalability that Sanjay touched on. It gives you an amazing ability to bring new capabilities to your citizens, to the warfighter, whoever it is you're serving. But there's another theme that you've already heard today, which is the realization that not only is the technology complex and it broadens the attack surface, but human beings actually take a little bit of time to change. And as you heard earlier, sometimes it doesn't make sense to completely re-architect an existing application, which is serving your customers. Maybe you want to take that monolithic application and wrap it in a container and then just move it up into the cloud and run it there. Or in some other cases, you say, hey, look, no, we actually need to create this new application, and not to get too much into the technology, but then do you use a microservices architected application? Do you use a service mesh? And then, oh, by the way, if you're gonna use a service mesh, how do you handle both the north-south authentication as well as the east-west authentication? How do you ensure that the code that you're running in a serverless application is actually the code that you intend it to be, especially if it's dealing with your private sensitive data, whether it's PII or whether it's classified. If you think about it, any NPE that executes is an attack surface. And so one of the things that Venafi is really excited to help this team with, and of course our commercial customers, is as you go on that journey, every person we work with, government or commercial, legitimately and thoughtfully says, look, what am I going to leave in my existing data center because it's maybe mission critical and it's risky? What am I going to pull forward and run as is, wrap the monolith? And then what am I going to build net new? And so if you think about that, all of a sudden, you get the power of hybrid, you get the power of cloud, but you have an exponential increase in complexity. And so we all know and love TLS, SSL TLS. I mean, that's what makes retail banking work. I mean, we're all banking customers of somebody, but we trust that that's actually Bank of America or Wells Fargo or JP Morgan Chase on the other end because of the magic of PKI. But again, if you step back, TLS is only one of many forms of NPE identities, or machine identities as we call it here. And that authentication that allows you to trust it, or allows one machine to trust another, all of a sudden becomes much more complex than securing, protecting, and managing a TLS certificate on a web banking application, to again securing a service mesh or ensuring that serverless code has not been tampered with. And that's really what we do here at Venafi. We love this stuff. It's the cryptography that is what underpins machine identities. We don't have time to get into other things like post-quantum and things like that. But to your second part of your question, Tom, about what do we see and what have we learned in commercial that I'm already starting to see in government and DoD is really what is being done with Cloud One and Platform One. Many of my commercial customers have realized that certain cloud service providers would like nothing better than for you to use all of their native platform services. Why? Because obviously they're a for-profit business and they want you to use all their native platform services to include their machine identity services, because that creates lock-in. And so I think the team working on Cloud One and Platform One has been very smart and very thoughtful in terms of an architectural pattern to say, look, we want certainly cloud agnostic and ideally cloud portability. Because you want to preserve that flexibility. You don't want to be beholden to any one set of technologies or cloud service providers. And I was thrilled to see the team over there really make that a fundamental first principle of what they're doing. But secondly, and I've already heard on this call as well, it is the realization that one needs to focus on the customer. I think it was Jordan who drew that out really clearly, which is, yes, there are many IT decisions and security decisions that need to be made and new threats and attacks that you need to protect against. But really, it's about serving your customer more effectively, whoever that customer is. And so how do you embrace and enable the speed to innovation and the speed to success while being smart about what you leave behind, what you carry forward, and whether or not you re-architect it. And again, that's where Venafi is really your trusted partner to help you think through as the perimeter dissolves and as the threats and attacks multiply, particularly nation states against government and DoD, thinking through how you protect against the next SolarWinds type of attacks. That's really what Venafi can help folks with.
Thank you, Aaron. We're going to go to the polls because they're going to really be pertinent to our next couple of questions. So if Alyssa, you can do the first poll question, we'll just kind of go through these really quick. So what are your NPEs or non-person entities today? Physical servers, VMs, container software? Is it mostly on-prem? less than 25, greater than 25% of cloud, greater than 50% of cloud, mostly in the cloud. So if we can answer that real quick, I'm not sure what we're going to come back with on this. Probably, okay. If we can show those results. Interesting mix. Aaron, does that surprise you at all? Because that seems about right, or?
It's very representative of what's happening in commercial. Typically, the pattern that I see is, particularly in the for-profit businesses, net new apps, which are expected to be revenue generating, are usually built cloud native in the cloud. But quite frankly, there was a recent article in IEEE Spectrum that just explained the decades of applications and extensions of applications and things like that. It's very, very difficult actually to thoughtfully move to the cloud. So no, not surprised at all.
Okay. Well, let's go to the next question, and I'll ask everybody about it because it gets in a little bit deeper. Go ahead, let's go to the next one. Identities, the new perimeter for cloud native applications. How are you defining, enforcing, and auditing security policy on their machine identities? So let's see this kind of answer. Let's see what we come up with. We'll give it about 10 seconds. Everybody's gonna be fast on the trigger, so we're gonna get some decent results based on the response. Quick response. Go ahead, Alyssa, what do we have? Okay, so we need some work in this area. Emily, you wanna, any observations from the last couple of questions that you can expand upon, at least, and what your experience tells you?
So something that Aaron mentioned really resonated with me is that we're mostly cloud, but the portability is really critical for us. Even just from from a business standpoint, we have Amazon primarily, but we're moving to Microsoft and Google. And so as we're building out our applications, yes, we're mostly cloud as it is. We're having to do that future casting and try not to bake us in too much to one specific cloud or one specific solution. So we always kind of have that mentality. So that really resonated with me. And I hopefully, we're able to continue that pattern and that rhythm to be somewhat cloud agnostic. But we're kind of on the fewer end of the spectrum where we're mostly cloud at this point.
Great.
So.
Alicia, any comments?
Yeah, I thought that was extremely interesting, and I love the option to say I plead the fifth. The first poll question was spot on. That's exactly where we are today at DHS headquarters. And then the second poll question, I actually didn't answer because we do have a team. We have a identity team that is working closely with our cloud platforms to ensure that whether we're in the data center or in one of our cloud environments, it's the exact same level of identity support. So we have an application called application authentication that we use across the board. And thus far, it's been pretty successful. So fingers crossed that we'll continue the same path.
Fantastic. How about you, Jordan? Any observations? We lost Jordan. How about we just switch over to you, Sanjay? Hopefully. Oh, Jordan, go ahead.
There you go. Sorry, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it's being saturated in this environment for a couple of years. It's hard to gauge depending on who the audience is, but at least, I mean, from the terms of where we are, I mean, NBIS is probably the biggest cloud IT capability that we have going right now. And a majority of our other stuff is probably about 90% is on-prem right now. But on kind of on smaller scales, like we work with our partner Army Analytics Group, AAG, and so they have cloud capability that we kind of work with them on with other projects, as well as utilizing the ServiceNow government community cloud. So those are kind of two different cloud type capabilities where you have the SaaS and then you have like the infrastructure as a service and that you kind of put your application on. And how you handle both of those things is vastly different, because with the ServiceNow capability that's made available, you kind of reduce a lot of the overhead. And for an agency like us that's kind of trying to get our feet wet and bring all these capabilities over, and most of it's just forms and workflows and business rules, right? Excel sheets and access databases and these kind of basic things. A tool like ServiceNow works really great because you can translate all of that stuff in there. But there are also things that are unique where you need like an infrastructure as a service or a platform as a service capability to fulfill those capabilities, and then meet any potential future demands of needs that you'll require in, say, the next 5 to 10 years, especially when you're talking about consuming more data, which means more system interfaces, which means more bandwidth. And just like we kind of mentioned before, that means a wider attack vector, meaning you kind of have to stay ahead of our adversaries, but at the same time, don't trip over our own feet. And that's always a challenge, is trying to stay ahead of our kind of adversaries that are trying to do the same things that we are, but at the same time, not trying to kind of, like I said, trip over our own feet, and using instantiation of AAG or ServiceNow helps us to kind of progress in that mission without compromising, some of the other things, or essentially the stuff that we have in operation right now.
Great. And Sanjay, can you close up this the polling for us? Any other
Sure, absolutely.
observations?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think I'll just give a quick sort of tidbit on this. Is as you may remember, Tom, we've talked about it in the past. We changed the cybersecurity model at the SBA back in 17, 18, and so we're all cloud-based from a cybersecurity standpoint, and we have full visibility into all of our IT assets, regardless of where they are, on premises, in cloud, blue-colored clouds, purple-colored clouds, orange-colored cloud, doesn't matter. Whether they're mobile devices or non-mobile devices, we have full visibility to that. And I'll give you just sort of a quick example of how that has been beneficial to us, especially in the last 12 months. Certainly, we've maintained our cybersecurity posture, knock on wood, but I'll give you two very specific examples. Hopefully, it'll resonate with the audience here. First and foremost, we implemented something called Conditional Access, and we'd done this 2 years ago. The simple definition of that is, if you think about it this way, if you meet a certain set of conditions, and those conditions could be things like, where you're connecting from. Given today, most people are not in the office environment, so you're connecting from a non-government, if you will, IP address, right? You could be in a coffee shop, you could be in your home, you could be at a train station, bus station, parking lot, name it, right? So that's a variable that's going into understanding the profile of what you represent. Then as a user, we have user profiles built up using machine learning capabilities because of these tools, and other factors like vulnerabilities on your endpoint and so on and so forth. So think of it as all of those things are dynamically, goes into a conditional access rules engine. And based on that set of conditions, if you meet those or you don't meet them, your access is automatically throttled, meaning you will have the full access, you'll have partial access, or you'll have no access. So that's the ability we've been able to implement. And again, that's all automated. We don't have to, go and manually look at, okay, the person A is now logging in from a risky place, so we need to now, turn off his or her access. So this is all automatically behind the scenes done. So that's one quick example. The other quick example, what we did was something called geofencing. So back in March, I have visibility into all of our incoming traffic. I looked at all the portals where we were getting traffic for the major flagship programs. I saw that we had traffic originating from outside the continental United States, knowing that these programs were intended only for continental United States. Working with my CISO, we implemented geofencing in about 6 hours. And what that did was any traffic that was originating from outside the continental United States was simply blocked. So again, we can talk a lot more about it, but I hope that sort of gives a perspective from the way we are looking at it and how we've been addressing this situation.
Yeah, I mean, there might have been off chance that somebody from Great Britain was working in a U.S. company, but that just kind of took care of a lot of risk.
Noise. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So my next question is, how do you overcome the challenge of proper access management, monitoring, and governance controls in light of ever increasing volume? We keep talking about, I think Aaron brought it up, the volume and type of machine identity supporting work. And then how do you make that transparent to your users? It's a big question, but maybe we can start off with you, Emily.
Yeah, I'm not sure we even have a good practice in place in a lot of areas. Sometimes we're relying on whitelisting, and things aren't necessarily as dynamic as they should be. And we're relying on having to coordinate and just kind of even that human component of people actually having to approve and whitelist our NPEs for us even to start engaging and moving operationally. So that's kind of one of the challenges of the things that we're working in. But Sanjay, I think everyone's kind of picked up on what he said, and it really resonating across the board is that the speed and scale and the velocity of things coming is not changing. I want to say that I think our governance is slowing us down in our ability to kind of answer to that demand and that change in our business process. I don't think we have a perfect fix for it. But right now, that our biggest hang up is the areas in which we're having to actually whitelist and have people physically in the loop in order for us to have these NPEs start even to engage. And so that's something over the course of the next couple of years we're looking to change and kind of take that human out of that loop and be more on the loop.
Right.
So.
Alicia, what's the department's look at this problem?
And it's funny that Emily said exactly what I was going to say, because right now I'm the person that's in the loop. I'm the person that's getting forms via email to approve access or deny or to verify. It's our governance has to catch up with where we're going with the cloud right now. So I'm trying to walk a really fine line where I'm quickly and moving toward automated ways to grant access to our environments for identity purposes and the machine's abilities to do their jobs without me, an actual person, interfering with their relationships, the connectivity. So I'm hoping that because we're so young, we're really just a year in to our HQ Cloud program, that maybe by this time next year, it'll be a lot more efficient.
Great. Jordan?
Yeah, so I think the approach that we're trying to take is start with trying to develop a standard of personas. So it all kind of comes down to the different personas and what level of access those personas need. Once you've kind of determined that with your subject matter experts or stakeholders, it's easier to get the tool to do whatever it is that you need. So in the DoD, the 2875, right, is the standard by which you give either users access to a system or privileged users, those who have kind of that root access, the control that they would need to perform their functions. And so trying to develop those personas, whether you are a general user or you're a backend user or some instantiation of the two, being able to define those things and find the commonalities, create the personas, then use the tools like ServiceNow is a pretty good tool for implementing kind of the workflow and the approval process, and that why those kind of functions is probably the logical approach that we're trying to take. And so as we have either people transferring, whether you're a government or contractor, on an activity, the first things that define is what's your persona, right? Are you a developer? Are you a sysadmin? Do you need privileged access? Do you not? Are you a general user? Are you a BA, XYZ? And then from there, you can define what process, what training you're required, what approvals that you need, and then set that persona, those individuals through that pipeline and kind of get them to the access and state that they need as quick as possible so they can perform the function while still having the traceability and auditability of being able to go back just in case if there's an incident or something, you can see, who made the approvals, how did this person get access to XYZ. You kind of do all the checkbox things that you would need for that. And so what we're trying to do is trying to establish those common personas based off of the different roles and kind of functions that from a general user of a certain mission area to a product owner to a BA to a sysadmin to a production release administrator, and then from there kind of set you down a path in kind of a tool that we're using. And it doesn't have to be ServiceNow, right? It could really be any kind of workflow form tool. Set you down that path so that way there's kind of a standard or a commonality of how these things are done, and then open it up to all the communities in the agency. Because our kind of approach is if you build it, they will come. But if you try to force it, folks tend to be resistant. So like I said, specifically in kind of our part of the directorate, what we're trying to do is make it to where the things that we're doing isn't primarily focused on the tool, it's focused on the process and the easeability by which some of these things can be done. And then at that point, right, you kind of make it adoptable at a more enterprise level because there's no other option, or it just works so good.
Great. And Aaron, you want to comment on the commenters, I think?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. And both Emily and Jordan, you touched on something that I think is really important, and I'd like to highlight to this group. And it is a bit of a crossover. I have a number of my commercial customers that, Jordan, like you, use their ITSM system, whether it's ServiceNow or Remedy, doesn't matter, to keep track of renewals, for example, of TLS certificates, as well as the approval processes and policies around that. And that's great at human speed and human scale. Now, let me contrast that with machine speed and machine scale and the controls you need against machine attacks. And one of the things that has really spiked since the anatomy of a breach of SolarWinds has come about is you may very well, I might be Tom's manager and Tom's a developer, and I pre-approve Tom to sign that code. And when you sign code, you're assuring that it is both from organization X and that it's malware free. But the challenge with SolarWinds obviously is very sophisticated attackers embedded payloaded malware in that code. And so if a human being, just because they know Tom, signed that code, you're actually failing to assure the user of that code that it's malware free and it's not going to cause harm. And so again, this is not intended to be a technical session, but one of the things that we're helping one of our leading banks on the West Coast with is an automated integration between their next-gen antivirus and our code signing offering, such that even if it has human approval, that we still won't sign it to assure that its provenance and integrity, unless we also find a hash of that code on a table from the malware tool that's signing it. So it's a little bit of a technical example, but that's where I think some very different considerations come into play for NPE identities or machine identities that are a little bit different than what you can do when you talk about human identities.
Great. Well, we just have a couple minutes. I wanted to go through each of the panelists and kind of like, what are you going to be working on this year in this area? And if we do this panel next year, where do you think we could? And I'll start off with you, Sanjay.
Excellent. So we continuing to be leaning forward as we have been over the last 3 or 4 years, Tom. We're certainly relying more and more on the native capabilities through the tools like cybersecurity tools. We have anomaly detection, artificial intelligence, machine learning capabilities. At some of the time, I'll be happy to kind of share a lot of those details. But we are automating these things. So a year from now, I would see us more in a more higher resilience posture. For us, obviously, maintaining the balance between People being productive while being secure has been high, but we have been able to do it in a very dynamic fashion, like I talked about, like conditional access as an example. Our anomaly detection tools are allowing us to be, forewarned of some things which may be potentially needing additional investigation. So we're moving fast and furious, if you will, and I hope 12 months from now we'll have a little bit more advanced stage that we have achieved so far from now.
Great. How about you, Emily?
I think as we continue to kind of build out our dev low and then push to the high side, we Aaron touched on it, the code poisoning, I think is one thing, as we're developing code and pushing it high, that we'll want to continue to R&D our approach to that, but then also the poisoning of training data and taking a look at that from an R&D perspective of how we can identify, those types of threats coming in as well, as we're kind of sharing training data amongst our community, making sure that's also safe and secure.
Great. And Alicia?
I think the biggest thing for us going into, well, two things, educating our customers, our users, on what they can do in the cloud environment, and automating a lot of the manual processes we're doing for the cloud, because we can use a lot of the cloud native tools, as well as I heard Jordan say several times, ServiceNow, to assist us with taking a lot of work off of our plates.
Right. And Jordan, I know you got I don't know how many moving parts you have. Where would you like to be here in a year?
Yeah, so there's a number of things going on. I can only kind of speak from the personal vetting and cloud services perspective, but we're getting ready to kind of go live with the initial capability involved in the trusted workforce requirements. And so that's something that'll be going live here soon. In addition to, NBIS has some kind of major releases coming out throughout this year, but other than that, there's kind of the cloud services team that we're kind of part of. We're trying to do essentially stand up the NIPRCIPR JWICs and include and utilize cross-domain capabilities and do something that I don't think I've seen amongst kind of our DoD partners is have somewhat of an end-to-end software development lifecycle process that includes the users from the perspective of, I have a general user who has a general function and they start here and then they end up with a capability here, and it goes through kind of like a full CI/CD type process, right? That involves getting the security pieces in place, getting the funding pieces in place, getting the contract support pieces in place, getting the cloud services pieces in place, getting the standard governance pieces in place, and all those different caveats that tend to end up being isolated components that this team works or that team works and this team works, and there's no really integrator amongst those things. We're trying to see if we can, in some sense, in a small scale, use a tool like Cloud Tamer and ServiceNow with our AWS component to where you can start a project or request a project in ServiceNow. Once it's approved and funded out of your kind of funding line, it sends something to Cloud Tamer, which then stands up your pre-visioned VPC within our AWS cloud with all the NIST 8500 and PHI, PI kind of controls already built in. It provides you with your AWS accounts, your developer accounts, your user accounts. It gives you your budget. It gives you how much you're burning monthly, right? It gives you your dashboard stuff. And then you can start development, in a really, really quick cycle. And then at that point, you move from that kind of phase one to a phase two of I'm developing an MVP capability. I'm going through that DoD RMF process. You have support team that is experienced on how to do that. They're going to manage that piece for you. And your job is to manage the requirements and the functionality. And then phase three, in the sense of now that your capability is operational, we're going to be able to kind of maintain the surrounding features of your continuous monitoring, your cloud security, give you information about how much your costs you're incurring in your cloud environment, whether you're going over or not, being able to manage the governance around who has access to those cloud, what kind of functions they are. Try to kind of have a end-to-end system that involves all the different core components of managing a application system or program, not just the tool, right? And so we're kind of working on a pilot right now that encompassing that, and we're hoping that around next year, next fiscal year, to be able to to see if that's workable, right? Because one of the things that we kind of believe in is if there's no return on investment, why are we doing it, right? We shouldn't be doing things just to do it. And so we're kind of trying to keep that in mind, starting small scale, seeing if there's a large enough return on investment, and then presenting it to say, hey, this needs to be kind of an enterprise capability that should be used for the agency's primary mission areas, because it provides efficiency to the operators, and not we're not just kind of giving them IT tools, right? We're giving them capability and not just tools.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'll tell you what, I've done these for a while. I haven't had too many chief product officers, and I think this is a really good idea. So where are we going to be in a year? And this is what you're planning out. That's why you're on with Gartner and you're on with Forrester. So where's this market going to be in a year? Without giving away the keys of the kingdom.
So Tom, thanks for having me. Look, I'm very excited to be here as an Air Force veteran. I have a soft spot for government, for DoD, and we are living through the most substantial transformation since mainframe to client server. And one of the things that always strikes me, both with our government customers and our commercial customers, is this tension between the developers and DevOps practices and the cloud and all these new technologies and information security. It's just this tension. We want to serve our customers more effectively. We want to move fast. We want to embrace DevOps. We want to embrace the cloud. But the security team, knowing the kinds of threats that you face, not just from APTs, but even just traditional hackers and the like. Our mission at Venafi is to help you do both. Right? Make sure you embrace cloud, DevOps, application modernization, serve your customers more effectively while doing it safely and securely at machine speed and machine scale. And so I'm really excited for the next panel discussion. Love to tell you more about how we can help you do that. But it definitely sounds, and I take away from the discussion today, that again, this is where the world is headed. It's just a question of how and when, and we're going to help you do it.
Great. Well, thank you, Aaron. And thank you, Emily, Sanjay, Alicia, Jordan, and Aaron. Been a great discussion. I've learned a lot, and I do these all the time. This is cool stuff, and I think we're going to end up making this like a working group and try to come up with some good results. But this is like our first foray into this area. So thank you very much, and for your time, and we'll see you the next time. And what do we have coming up next in ATARC? I call it the ATARC channel at this point. We have so many different things going on. Yes, and you know what? We talked about ServiceNow a little bit and Salesforce. We are actually, we couldn't make this up. Our next event is the Low Code Virtual Summit, which is going to be pretty interesting. It's going to help agencies that don't want to build something from scratch. And I always love the balance about building from scratch and when do I make the business decision to use some kind of service. So should be a fascinating discussion. And I think we got a couple of panels going there. So we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye.